Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. My question is from the teachers on Facebook. What is Maryland's plan to protect public education from the voucher-imposed system that Betsy DeVoe and Governor Hogan are forcing upon us?
I think Betsy DeVos is probably the least confident. There have been a few good ones. General Mattis over at Defense. He's now Secretary Mattis. That was a good pick. General McMaster. I'm sorry?
That was under your list, sir.
I'm sorry?
Under your list of good cabinet picks. You got the whole list there.
Yeah. No, not cabinet level. McMaster at National Security is not a bad pick. But yeah, after that, it just goes down, fast. Tillerson might look like a statesman, but you don't know if he's working for Exxon or for the United States. Or Russia, yes indeed. The president's failed to establish any vision for how we're going to take on Russian aggression, and I don't really think that he's committed to doing that. But coming back to your education, because you may recall during her nomination hearings, she didn't even understand the basic framework of the federal government's involvement in education. And she didn't understand the IDEA, equity in education funding. She didn't understand anything about Title I, children living in families, living in poverty, and our commitment to them. And she probably doesn't understand that while the federal government's funding of education, is depending on states and counties, it's give or take about 10%. And while it's a small percentage, it's a big percentage. Think of your own, personal budget at home. 10% makes a difference, right? 10% makes a difference. So the policies that come out of the federal government regarding education, particularly when they're tied to that 10%, mean a big deal for states. So she's had a career in supporting charter schools, which I know there are probably many in the room that support charter schools and some don't. And Maryland has a charter school program. It's probably the weakest in the country. And there's some things that we can do to modify that program. But that's the least of my concerns. My concern is your concern, and that's creating a voucher program in public education, and that you would have a administration official comparing historically black colleges and universities as a choice program to support your argument for vouchers. There's a lot of things that you don't understand about education, about historically black colleges and universities. I'm all for choice in schools, but this is the choice that I'm for. I'm for the choice when a parent or grandparent can wake up on any given day and say, I've got great public schools to send my kids, and I've got private school options to send my kids to, and this is what I choose. That's choice. And your private school, your public schools are failing you, and unfortunately in many communities in Maryland and across America, some public schools are failing our kids. You don't have a true choice. But my responsibility as a public official, even though it's 10%, and it was my responsibility when I was lieutenant governor, where it was closer to 50%, is to make sure that our public school choices were available to all families around the country. So you cannot divert resources from that public school system. Public schools have an obligation or responsibility that few, if any, private schools have. We have to take you as you are. Whether you're hungry when you come to school, whether you have emotional challenges at home, you have they don't have that. Many will tell you they do, but if stuff gets rough, they'll find a way to say, little Johnny and little Jane, this is not a really good fit for them, and maybe you ought to consider somewhere else and not come back next week. You can't do that in public schools. So we're going to do everything we can, to resist. Let me share this story with you, and I need to do it now because you're going to hear a common theme in response to a lot of your questions. You're not going to walk out of here and think like, goodness gracious, like Congressman Brown put down a real proposal on how we're going to stop the Republicans. Because the truth is, we're not going to stop them, but you're going to stop them. In my workplace, simple majority rules and the Republicans rule. But here was a story that one of my colleagues in the Democratic caucus shared with us when we came back in November, or they came back. I just showed up for the first time, and a lot of us were sort of really concerned about the direction of the country. So, you know, there's a story about a small town in Texas around the time of the Civil War. And this small town in Texas was made up of free black men and women and their families recently enslaved in this country in the South. Small town of people. And one day they had heard, the townspeople had heard that the Confederacy was approaching their town. And it was a Confederate cavalry unit that was notorious for abusing the civilian population. So as this cavalry unit approached, the townspeople fled, as you would reasonably expect them to do. And as this horse-mounted unit started down Main Street, this one woman, old woman, ran into her home, went into her closet, and grabbed a broomstick. She came back out, she met that horse-mounted cavalry officer right there in the middle of Main Street, broomstick in hand, and he looked down at her and said, "Old woman, do you think that you are going to defeat me and this army with that broomstick?" And she said, "I reckon I won't, but at least you'll know where I stand." And while there are many military engagements that we recognize as important in the outcome of the Civil War, that old woman's stance with that broomstick was perhaps just important in that battle, in those wars at that time, as those military engagements. It's going to take a community with broomsticks, and it's going to take members of Congress, both on the floor of Congress, where we have a voice, but also in our communities. And now I'm very mindful of my role. This is an official town hall where we are educating the community about the strengths and the weaknesses of policies in front of us, where we together will make sure that we pass an agenda that works for all of America. So you're going to be very important in this work, very important in this work.